So Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, he's our 11th Imam, the father of the Imam of our time. And I can speak for myself. Let me make it as personal as possible. Okay, first Imam we know a lot about. Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, at least for myself, okay, a bit less. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, okay, we know a lot about because we remember him on the day of Ashura, we have Muharram. But after Imam Hussein alayhi salam, it begins to kind of like, the interest begins to die down, and we know less and less about the Imams. When it comes to the father of the Imam of our time, again, like the amount we actually know about his life is very minimal. Now, one of the I would say the oppressions that we have committed upon the Ahlul Bayt is not learning from the lives of the Ahlul Bayt for what we can do right now, okay? Let alone not knowing enough about them. But when it comes to the 11th Imam, I think the oppression first is that we don't know enough about him. And then obviously that lends itself to the fact that, okay, if you don't know much about him and his life, how can you actually learn from him? This is when I actually, when you look at the life of the Imam, you actually realize there's a lot that you can gain from him, taking into consideration the situation that we are in, right? And I'm hoping to highlight some of those points, so hopefully we can benefit in that regards. Please recite salawat. Bro, sorry. Do you have paracetamol? Or do you have paracetamol or Panadol? Just, thank you. So if you look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, you look at the time of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, and after the time of Imam Rida alayhi salam, you see that there's this fear among the rulers of that time. And what was the fear? That there are lovers of the Ahlul Bayt everywhere. Right? They couldn't figure out how they got everywhere. They couldn't figure out how they reached to such a strength that we actually need to be careful of whatever they are doing, wherever they are, in order to make our decisions in government. You have the army, you have the government, you have your palaces, you have everything that you need. But still the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt had reached such a stage, their network had grown so vast that the rulers of that time were scared. They were really worried. Okay? I would say one way to describe the followers of the Ahlul Bayt at that time, it may seem very obvious at the beginning, but they were true muwahhids, okay? People who genuinely believed in Tawheed, right? And to super summarize this, because this discussion in itself requires a lengthy kind of lengthy discourse, our scholars say Tawheed is summarized best in the phrase La ilaha illallah, okay, which is the rejection of the non-divine and going towards Allah. So La ilaha is the rejection of the non-divine and then going towards Allah. Now, as muwahhids, what would happen is that these people would reject all the non-divine systems that were around them. So they didn't only see the rejection of the non-divine in the sense that, okay, I'm not going to bow down in front of an idol, but also the rejection of the non-divine in the sense that if there's a non-divine educational system, if there's a non-divine governmental system, if there is a non-divine any other type of economic system, right, we're not going to accept that, right? We will not be comfortable with that kind of system being upon us. Why? Because we are muwahhids, we are those who believe in Tawheed, we are those who reject all systems that are not divine. That's who the followers of the Ahlul Bayt were. So naturally, wherever they were, wherever this network of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt was around the Islamic world at that time, and some reports of that network being outside of the Islamic world as well, it was a point of bother for the rulers of those areas. Right? You had a group of people who were among you who would not pay allegiance to anyone but God, who would not pay allegiance to anyone but the divine system, who would not pay allegiance to anyone but, for example, the Ahlul Bayt and those who would come down from them. Thank you very much. And even if they were law-abiding citizens in those places, that fact that they were law-abiding citizens was only there because their religion told them to do so. So their allegiance was still to Islam, their allegiance was still to the Ahlul Bayt, their allegiance was still to the Imam of the time. Even if they were law-abiding citizens, they were so because the Imam told them to do so, because Islam told them to do so. Right? Their allegiance was always purely and solely for the Imam, for the Ahlul Bayt, for Islam, for Allah. Right? That's why they were always considered a threat. So after the time of the 8th Imam, you see this network spread across the whole of the Islamic world and beyond. And the rulers did not know what to do. You see that there's this confusion in decision making in all of in the caliphate after or during the time of the 8th Imam and after. They just don't know what to do with this problem that they have, right? And that is what led to what happened to Imam al-Hadi, okay, our 9th Imam. Sorry, our 10th Imam. When they could not figure out what to do, they took the Imam into captivity, brought him to what we now know as Samarra, right? Now, this place was not actually, a town or a village or a city. At that time, this place was a military encampment. Now, the rulers were so scared of doing something directly to the Imams that they had to come out with a solution which wasn't really killing them, but at the same time, they wouldn't be able to help the movement grow and get stronger. So Imam al-Hadi was brought to Samarra to be kept in this base. You can't even call it house arrest, right? Basically, he had a place to stay, which was surrounded by military barracks, right? Almost like dorms. Not only that, why was this space specifically chosen? Because the soldiers who were over here came from Turkish background and they were new to the religion at that time, right? So the Caliph thought, okay, Mutawakkil at that time, thought, okay, let me put the Imam in a place where his followers aren't close to him, and those people who are close to him have no idea who this person actually is. Right? So that's why Samarra was actually chosen. The difficulties that the Imam had to face in Samarra are something else. I'll mention a few of them. But what's interesting again is you see the Shahada of our 10th Imam, and you see the funeral prayers. Again, the rulers are scared. Why? Because, okay, he was supposed to be under our control. The whole city gets flooded for the funeral prayers of this individual. And again, they're scared. How did that happen? We thought we had things under lockdown. And then our 11th Imam, his whole life was in this encampment, in this military barracks. His whole life was spent there. Beginning, middle, and the end. So when you go to Samarra, by the way, unlike the other shrines, you're going to a place which was the prison, the house, and the burial place of the Imam. And it is something special. For those of you who haven't been, may Allah give you the tawfiq. For those who have been, when you go there, there is a different feel to it. Right? That was the home of 3 of our Imams, including the Imam of our time. Najaf was not the home of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Karbala was not the home of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, for example. But this place was the prison, home, and the burial place of 3 of our Imams. What you see happen, again, at the martyrdom of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam is this flood of his followers come. This grief felt throughout all of the Islamic world and people coming from everywhere. And again, this shock, like, this Imam completely under our watch. And the movement seems to have grown stronger. How? How did that happen? It's a very important question for us to ask as well. As I said, because I think there's some really important lessons which we can gain from what the Imam had to go through. Just to give you an example of how difficult the situation was, two of the companions, really well-known companions of our 11th Imam, they are known as the orange seller and the oil seller, right? And the reason why they have these names is because what they would do is they would sell oranges, for example. They'd come close to the window of the Imam and they'd pretend to sell oranges over there, whilst at the same time they would be giving letters to the Imam, giving khums money to the Imam, and taking any instructions and orders from them to go elsewhere. The story of the oil seller is even more interesting. So they would go in, and within his big container of oil, he would have smaller containers. And in those smaller containers would be money and letters and questions and stuff from the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, right? So he would go in, the Imam would take that container, open the letters, give the responses, put them back in the container, and he would put it back in his big container, and then off he'd go. And all of a sudden, 1 week later, some guy halfway across the world gets thrown off his throne. And no one has a clue that it was actually an order that was given by this Imam, which is supposed to be completely surrounded under lock halfway across the world. He used to have to report to the courtyard of the Ruda twice every week. There was a meeting which he had called for his followers. And just to give you an idea of how difficult the times were, when they came, he quickly sent out a message to them saying, when you come and you see me coming, do not say salam to me. Do not point towards me. And do not even look at me for too long. Why? Because if you do, then you could be signing your own death warrant. That's how difficult the situation was that the Imam, was dealing with. The question again you have to ask is, what allowed them to survive? What allowed the movement to survive? We're talking about the same movement which at the time of, for example, the burial of Lady Zahra sallallahu alayha, they say, some reports say 5, some say 7, some say 11 people were there at the funeral of Lady Zahra sallallahu alayha. From that to a stage where you can be an Imam that is under watch for all of your life, and you have a movement which spans the entire Islamic world and beyond. What is it that allowed them to survive? To put it very simply, one word: wilaya. Wilaya is the reason why the movement existed, it's the reason why it was maintained, and it's the reason why it thrives and flourishes till now. What is this wilaya? I'm going to quote, there's a beautiful quote that Ayatollah Khamenei has in which he's describing this movement. He says, imagine the movement being a pure stream of water that has to go through this journey till the Day of Judgment. Sometimes this stream goes slowly, sometimes you see it progresses quicker. Sometimes it is no more than a trickle, and sometimes it becomes a vast body of water. There are times in which the stream falls underground and it flows, and then sometimes you see that same stream that went underground, it vanished, it comes back out of the ground and continues flowing. Throughout all of this, the stream stays untainted. It stays that pure bit of water that can still purify everything else and give life to everything else. Throughout this whole journey, how has this water stayed pure? Wilaya. What is wilaya? In its most simplest form, wilaya is equal to attachment. Okay? An intense form of attachment. Some of our scholars define wilaya as an attachment that is so strong that nothing external can penetrate. Okay? Wilaya. Now, This stream of water, there's two types of wilaya. There's horizontal wilaya and there's vertical wilaya. Okay? Vertical wilaya is the relationship that you have with those above you. Right? So for example, your parents have authority over you. The Ahlul Bayt have authority over you. The Prophet has authority over you. Allah has authority over you. Right? This is vertical wilaya. Horizontal wilaya is the attachment that you have between yourselves. The closeness, that intense closeness that you have between yourselves. The reason why that stream remained pure is because each droplet that made that stream was connected to such an extent that when it is that body of water, you don't see it as individuals. You just see a body of water. But that body of water is made up of particles, right? And those particles are so close, so intensely attached to each other that you don't see them as being different. Right? That's what horizontal wilaya is. If you look at Surah Ma'idah, verse number 56, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَمَن يَتَوَلَّ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولَهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Whoever takes for his guardians, the word wali is used. Whoever takes for his guardians Allah, his apostle, and the faithful, فَإِنَّ حِزْبَ اللَّهَ هُمُ الْغَالِبُونَ, should know that the party of Allah are indeed the victorious. What made them victorious? You see the connection between them and Allah, accepting the wilaya. Whoever takes for his guardians Allah, that vertical wilaya, his apostle, again, the prophets, that vertical wilaya, and then the faithful, that horizontal wilaya. That's the secret to the success. Okay? That's the secret to the success. فَإِنَّ حِزْبَ اللَّهِ هُمُ الْغَالِبُونَ. And the party of Allah, indeed the victorious. I promise I'm not repeating that verse for no other reason but to make the point that the party of Allah are the ones who are victorious. Another verse, again Surah Ma'idah, verse number 54. O you who have faith, should any of you desert his religion, Allah will soon bring a people whom He loves and who love Him. There is a bill there for you. That's fine, thank you. Should any of you desert his religion, Allah will soon bring a people whom He loves and who love Him. Again, this vertical wilaya. Who will be humble towards the faithful and stern towards the faithless. Again, horizontal wilaya. So the first bit, Allah loves them and they love Allah, vertical wilaya. And the second bit, horizontal wilaya. They are humble towards the faithful and stern towards the faithless. And you see this repeatedly. Let me just make a point over here. As the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, what generally tends to happen is when you say wilaya, straight away, your thinking goes towards, for example, the wilaya of Amirul Mu'mineen. Right? You think about that vertical form of wilaya, but we don't focus on that horizontal form of wilaya. We hardly do. We have a tradition which says, from Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, that you can pray during the nights, you can fast during the days, you can give a mountain's worth of wealth in zakat. If you do not have wilaya, none of this will be counted. Now when we see this verse, we automatically equate that to meaning accepting the wilaya of the Ahlul Bayt, for example, or Allah. But in this tradition, there is no condition that has been placed that this is only a reference to vertical wilaya. Okay? This is a reference to horizontal wilaya as well. If you do not respect and strengthen those attachments between yourselves, then the result is the same. We actually have another tradition which says, along the lines of, I'm super paraphrasing, if you do not look after the needs of your brothers and sisters, by extension, none of your deeds will be accepted. We have a tradition which says if you do not look after the affairs of others, then do not expect there to be a seal for your actions. All of these are pointing towards the same thing. If you don't have wilaya, vertical or horizontal, none of your deeds will be accepted. Right? So this horizontal wilaya is as important as that vertical wilaya. We focus a lot on the vertical wilaya. That's important, it's very important. And for a lot of us, I can speak for myself, we've not understood exactly what that vertical wilaya is supposed to be either. But just for today, I want to focus on this, the horizontal side of things, because I don't think we do. I don't think we normally do. There's a beautiful letter from our 10th Imam to the people of Qom. Now, at that time, the holy city of Qom was known as one of those places which has absolute loyalty towards the Ahlul Bayt. They were surrounded, the villages and cities close by were surrounded by the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. In fact, Lady Ma'suma, sallallahu alayha, when she was attacked near Qom, she was attacked by a nearby village who found out that, you know, the caravan of the family of the Prophet are coming, and they attacked the sister of Imam al-Rida. And she came to Qom because the people of Qom gave refuge, right? The people of Qom have always been known to be those who are close to the Ahlul Bayt. The 10th Imam wrote a letter to them. Look at what he highlights in this. Our intention is still firm and ourselves are satisfied with your good thoughts. Vertical wilaya. Then, the fixed relationship between us and you is firm. Again, vertical wilaya. It is a will that our ancestors and your ancestors had recommended, and a covenant that had been entrusted to our youth and your old men. They are still on their faith, and Allah has granted us in close relationship and close kinship. The scholar has said a faithful is a brother of a faithful. That stress on what? Horizontal wilaya. So initially he speaks of vertical wilaya, then the stress on horizontal wilaya. There's a beautiful letter he has to one of his closest companions, Ali ibn al-Hasan. He was also actually from Qom. And again in this he says, I also recommend you to pardon others, suppress anger, continuously associate with kin, comfort brothers, and try to carry out their needs and at difficulty and ease. Again, the stress. Strengthen that horizontal wilaya. I'll mention something on the side here very quickly. Sheikh Zakzaki, the leader of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, he was interviewed and he was asked, according to you, what makes the movement so successful? It's not a joke. In less than one generation, some say 8 million, some say 25 million people becoming followers of the Ahlul Bayt. That's not a joke, right? After Arba'in, still people, it blows their mind that after Iraq, the biggest gathering for Arba'in in the whole world is in Nigeria. Right? That's how many, and that's in one generation. The walk from Najd to Karbala is 80 odd kilometers. The walk that they do in Nigeria is 240 kilometers. Right? How did this movement come about? So he was asked, what made it successful? And he gave 9 responses. 8 of them were to do with horizontal wilaya. One of them, the most powerful, I'll mention very briefly. He said that one of the reasons why we're successful is because between us, we try and find even the smallest excuse to increase our love. The smallest of reasons to increase our love. Right? Smallest of excuses. The problem is when we start talking about sacrificing for one another, our heart, our mind goes straight away to, okay, I want to earn enough money so I can buy a house for my friend. Right? Or I want to buy someone a car. Or I want to give them $1 million, what's the currency over here? I'll stick to pounds, right? £1 million, or after Brexit, I'm not sure how much that would be worth, but okay, we think on that level, right? Sheikh Zakzaki said we would try and find even the smallest of excuses to try and increase the love between each other. I'll give you an example. There's a brother who Sheikh Arash asked me afterwards, because you know him really well. There's a brother that I've actually seen like do this in real life, right? I'll give you a very small example, something maybe you guys can kind of, just to make you realize how small it has to be, right? So we went out to a place to eat, and we all paid and everything. He didn't pay for us. He didn't have the money to, right? But does that mean he's like thinking to himself, okay, I will express my solidarity and brotherhood once I have enough money to pay? No, what did he do? Okay, we all paid for our meals. He's like, give me your receipts. And we're like, okay, why does he want our receipts? But okay, fine, we gave it to them. Why did he want our receipts? We were all busy in our conversation. What he did was, as our numbers were being called out, instead of us having to go and collect our meals, we didn't even know what numbers we were because he had the receipts. He would go and get them. Right? Little thing. But that little thing I remember after 10 years, and I'm saying it to you guys now because of how much it affected me. I had this thing in Qom. We had this 20-minute break in the mornings. And I would always go to the shop across the road, and I had this routine where I'd get 2 cakes and 2, they had this like strawberry milkshake kind of thing, right? Stuff which I feed my 4-year-old right now. I remember one day I went there, and just to show you, you know, the little bit that you can do for someone else, I went there, and as per routine, I got my, 2 cartons of milk, and I went to get my 2 cakes. I got one. As I was going for the other one, my friend who was with me, he grabbed my hand and he stopped me. I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, just for today, don't have 2 cakes. I was like, no, this is my routine. You can't stop me doing this. He's like, no, just for today. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, just on this little bit, just fight your nafs. Just see what happens. The effect that had on me. The short-term effect was I didn't speak to him for like a couple of days. The long-term effect is I'm willing to sacrifice whatever I have for this brother now. Because of that little sacrifice he made at that time. He's like, let me do this little bit. Right? I mean, he didn't need money to do that. There's something else you guys can do, which definitely doesn't require you to have money. Right? Because some people are like, I don't have money to give, so what should I do? And then the people who you're giving to as well, they're like, okay, we feel kind of, a bit of humility, taking from others as well. Okay, there's something that you can give, which doesn't require you to have money, and the person who's taking doesn't even need to know. Right? Du'as. Forget du'as. Du'as, again, as soon as I say du'a, we're like, oh, I'm going to dedicate Dua Joshan and Kabir to like this friend of mine. It's like, no, calm down, right? Recite 1 salawat for your friend, for example. Make the intention that, okay, I'm reciting this salawat. I don't know if I get thawab for it or not. But if there is any thawab for it, like, give it to this like friend of mine. Little things like that, right? Little things like that. When we see the advices of the Ahlul Bayt in terms of, things that we can do to improve akhlaq and stuff like that, right? Why are they saying it? They're not saying it so that, you can, in and of itself, you can all just be happy and playful. No, it's because it strengthens the movement. You as Muslims, we as Muslims have a responsibility to make this world a better place. It's our responsibility to strengthen the movement. So even when it comes to our akhlaq, like when we're mentioning little points like that, it's not so we live in our individual bubbles and whatever's happening in the world can happen. No, it's so that we get out of our bubbles and we become the movement which can be a force. Like Imam, you're spending your whole life surrounded by enemies, our 11th Imam, and the advice that you're giving to your followers is be friends? Is that how we're going to take it? Or are we going to see that as something essential the Imam saw in the success of the overall movement? That's what we're supposed to be taking from them. That's how we can be a part of that movement as well. as opposed to just good little people who claim to be following Islam. Please recite salawat. There's something comes to mind. Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir al-Mizan, at some point, I wish I remembered exactly where, he says that there is no action of ours, zero, no action of ours that we can do, a religious act that we can do, which is purely individual or personal. Every single act in Islam, every single act is social. Every single act. Even that 2 rak'at of prayers you do in the dark, in your room, with, when no one can see you. Even that is a social act. Why? Because it's building within you the qualities which will affect society. That's the religion we believe in. So when we're going through these points, right, it's not just so we can be nice to each other in our little bubbles. No, it's so we can become a movement that is supposed to affect the whole world. Right? That's what we're here to do. Again, sayings from the Imam. There are 2 qualities such that there is no quality above them. Okay? This isn't me speaking or some random, this isn't some marja or even the Wali al-Faqih speaking, right? This is the Imam saying there are 2 qualities, above them there is no better quality. It's not a joke. What are they? Faith in Allah, vertical wilayah, and the serving of brothers. Like, how much more stress does there need to be? How much more motivation do we need to start figuring out ways to start sacrificing for each other? What more do we want? This is how the movement was successful. These are essential qualities of that movement. So if you want to be a part of that movement, these 2 things have to be taken care of. Again, from the Imam, the 11th Imam, the best of your brothers is he who forgets your wrong against him and remembers your kindness to him. Right? And look, why are we doing all of this? Like, what's this movement leading up towards? Right? Is not one of the milestones we want to reach the return of the Imam? Of course it is, right? It's a good day to remember that as well. The birthday of the father of the Imam. The reason why we want to be a part of the movement, the reason why we want to understand the essential factors which strengthen the movement, is so that we can build up towards the return of the Imam. Let me mention something which I know I've spoken to some of you about before. A group from Khurasan came to Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. Please recite salawat. And they said to the Imam, we have a whole army behind us, rise up and we will rise with you. Right? Look at the response of the Imam. He didn't ask about how big is this army of yours. He didn't ask about how much money they have. He didn't ask about how many weapons there are. What did he say? He said, is the situation between you such that one of you can put their hands in the pockets of another, take out whatever it is they need, and that person won't even ask how much has been taken? It's like, Imam, they're talking about revolution, they're talking about rising up. Ask about weapons. Ask about how big the army is. No, he's saying, is that the relationship which exists between you? What is he asking about? How strong is the wilayah between you? That horizontal wilayah again. What would have happened if that horizontal wilayah existed? The Imam would have risen up. If we want the Imam of our time to rise up without thinking that we need to strengthen the horizontal relationships between us, we're having a laugh. And there's plenty of things which point us towards this. I just mentioned this one incident where the Imam didn't rise up because that relationship didn't exist between the people. That's how important horizontal wilayah is for us. I'll leave you with a verse from the Quran. I always say one of the benefits of not knowing when you've started is you don't know how long you're supposed to go on for. But I'll finish with this verse of the Quran, and hopefully I haven't taken too much of your time, and hopefully I'm not finishing too quickly. I'm sure, yeah, I'm good. Okay, Jazakallah. Beautiful verse from the Quran. Beautiful verse from the Quran. Surah Al Imran, the last verse. Surah Al Imran, verse number 200. Right? This is the kind of verse that I'm going to force Shaykh Arish to have printed, put in a frame, and plastered to the wall in his office. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. O people of faith. Isbiru wa sabiru wa rabitu wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. O people of faith, be patient. And then wasabiru, be patient together, not just as individuals, with one another. Stand firm, right? Remember, when I say sabr, I'm not talking about being patient as if accept anything, all the oppressions upon you. No. According to the Quran, sabr means steadfast. It doesn't mean, be patient in the way that we take it. It means be patient in front of trials and tribulations. Don't let those trials and tribulations stop you. Okay, so this verse says, O people of faith, be patient or be steadfast. Then be steadfast together and close your ranks. Rabitu, close your ranks. If you do this and have taqwa, if you do this, what happens? لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. You may be among the victorious. Conditions to attain victory for us. The reason why the movement remained and was strengthened and is flourishing. The reason why it existed was because of this. The attachment that we have vertically and the strength of the attachment we're supposed to have with one another. It will be weird of me to leave without mentioning a story from one of the shuhada. So let me mention something. I think it's probably better if I don't mention the person who's narrating this. But it's being narrated about one of the shuhada from the Iran-Iraq war. His name was Sayyid Ahmad Kazemi. I mentioned this story to some of you before, so it's a very powerful story. Let's just say the person who's narrating this story, let's call him Qasim for now. For those of you who know who that is. He says, he was asked, why do you think that so many of those who were close to you became, shaheed, but you didn't? What was different? And he said, the relationship I had with Sayyid Ahmad Kazemi was such that I would not buy for myself something unless I could buy it for him. But the reason why he became shaheed and I didn't is because he would never buy anything for himself unless he could buy me something better. That's who the awliya of Allah were. These are the lessons that we can inshallah take from the life of Imam Hassan al-Askari. I've got some more notes down, but I've actually lost my ability to read them at the moment. Let's finish with a Fatiha for all of the shuhada, for the rightful scholars that have passed away, for all the marhumeen of the brothers and sisters present in this session, and For all those who do not have anyone to recite a Fatiha for them, please recite a Fatiha after a salawat.